He had been working at the same hospital for 15 years, never causing any problems, quietly doing his job, until that night came. When the armed attacker entered the hospital, the security guard's tactical response shocked everyone. This man wasn't just a security guard. Welcome to the human stories. Before we begin this powerful tale of hidden expertise and quiet protection, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who continue serving others long after their official careers end. Chicago General Hospital stood like a beacon of hope on the city's south side, its 12 floors of medical expertise serving one of the most challenging urban communities in America. The massive medical complex operated 24 hours a day, treating everything from routine emergencies to the most complex trauma cases that the city could produce. With over 2,000 employees and hundreds of patients at any given time, the hospital required comprehensive security to protect vulnerable people in a neighborhood where danger was never far away. Frank Williams had been part of that security team for 15 years. At 64 years old, he was the senior night shift security officer, responsible for monitoring the hospital's main entrance, patrolling the corridors, and ensuring that patients, visitors, and staff could move safely throughout the facility during the overnight hours when the building was most vulnerable. Frank was exactly what people expected from a hospital security guard: quiet, professional, and unremarkable in a way that made him nearly invisible to the hundreds of people who passed him every night. He wore the standard blue security uniform, carried a radio and flashlight, and conducted his rounds with methodical precision that never varied from night to night. The hospital staff knew Frank as a reliable, steady presence who never caused problems and could always be counted on to handle difficult situations with calm professionalism. He had dealt with intoxicated patients, aggressive family members, and occasional disturbances without ever losing his composure or requiring backup from outside law enforcement. What none of them knew was that Frank Williams had spent 23 years with the Chicago Police Department, the last 12 as a member of the elite SWAT team that responded to the city's most dangerous tactical situations. From 1980 to 2003, he had been involved in hundreds of high-risk operations, including hostage rescues, armed confrontations, and counter-terrorism responses that had saved countless lives throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. Frank's transition to civilian security work had been carefully planned. After retiring from the police department in 2003 with full benefits and commendations, he had deliberately chosen work that would allow him to continue protecting people while avoiding the high-stress, life-and-death situations that had defined his law enforcement career. Hospital security seemed like the perfect opportunity to serve his community without the constant pressure of tactical operations. But Frank's SWAT training never really left him. As he walked through Chicago General's corridors every night, he automatically assessed security vulnerabilities, identified potential threat vectors, and maintained the kind of situational awareness that had kept him alive during 23 years of police work. His colleagues in the security department saw these habits as the careful attention to detail of a conscientious employee. They had no idea they were observing the ingrained behaviors of a former tactical operations specialist. Frank had adapted his law enforcement skills to hospital security with characteristic precision. He studied the building's layout with the same thoroughness he had once applied to clearing dangerous structures during SWAT operations. He knew every entrance, every exit, every blind spot, and every potential hiding place throughout the 12-floor facility. His approach to security patrols reflected his tactical background in subtle ways. Frank moved through the hospital with the quiet efficiency of someone trained to clear buildings under hostile conditions. He positioned himself to maintain visual contact with potential threats, used reflective surfaces to observe areas before entering them, and maintained communication protocols that would allow rapid response to any emergency situation. The hospital's security protocols were standard for medical facilities. Monitor entrances, respond to disturbances, coordinate with law enforcement when necessary. But Frank had enhanced these procedures with tactical elements that his supervisors attributed to his diligent work ethic. His incident reports were more detailed than necessary, his threat assessments were comprehensive, and his emergency response plans covered scenarios that most hospital security personnel would never consider. Over 15 years, Frank had established himself as Chicago General's most reliable and professional security officer. His shift covered the overnight hours when the hospital was most vulnerable, and he had never failed to handle a security situation effectively. His supervisors considered him irreplaceable, though they sometimes wondered about his unusually comprehensive knowledge of tactical procedures and emergency protocols. Frank's law enforcement background occasionally surfaced in ways that surprised his colleagues. During a training session on workplace violence prevention, he demonstrated knowledge of threat assessment and de-escalation techniques that exceeded what most security guards would ever need. When the hospital experienced a minor chemical spill emergency, Frank's response was so professional and effective that the hazmat team asked where he had received his training. The transformation began on a Tuesday night in March, when Frank noticed patterns of behavior that triggered his trained instincts. During his evening rounds, he observed individuals in the hospital who didn't match typical patient or visitor profiles. Their movements were purposeful rather than concerned. Their attention was focused on security procedures rather than medical needs, and their questions to staff members seemed designed to gather information about hospital operations rather than patient care. Frank's SWAT training had taught him to recognize surveillance and reconnaissance activities, and what he was observing at Chicago General had all the characteristics of pre-operational planning. The individuals were mapping the facility, studying security procedures, and identifying vulnerabilities in ways that suggested they were preparing for something more than routine medical visits. A normal security guard might have noted these irregularities but dismissed them as unusual but harmless behavior. Frank's tactical background, however, had taught him that seemingly innocent reconnaissance often preceded serious threats. The patterns he was identifying could indicate planning for robbery, assault, or worse. Frank began conducting his own counter-surveillance operation, using techniques he had learned during 23 years of police work to monitor the suspicious individuals without alerting them to his attention. He documented their visits, tracked their movements through the hospital, and analyzed their behavior patterns using threat assessment protocols that went far beyond standard security procedures. What Frank discovered was deeply concerning. The suspicious visitors were conducting systematic reconnaissance of Chicago General's security systems, emergency procedures, and staff schedules. They had identified the locations of security cameras, mapped the positions of security personnel, and studied the hospital's response protocols for various emergency situations. Most troubling to Frank's trained eye, the reconnaissance was focused on areas of the hospital that would provide maximum impact for a violent attack: the emergency department, the main lobby, and the corridors that connected different wings of the facility. The pattern suggested planning for an assault designed to cause maximum casualties among patients, visitors, and medical staff. Frank faced a decision that would determine whether his carefully maintained cover as a simple security guard could survive contact with his professional past. He could report his suspicions to hospital administration and hope that appropriate authorities would investigate, or he could take direct action using skills and knowledge that would inevitably reveal his true background. The decision was made for him at 2:47 a.m. on Thursday morning, when Frank's worst fears materialized. A man armed with a semi-automatic weapon entered Chicago General's main lobby with the clear intent of causing maximum harm to everyone in the facility. The attacker moved with purpose and preparation, following a route that Frank recognized from the reconnaissance activities he had been monitoring. The gunman's approach was methodical and calculated. He had chosen the overnight hours when security presence was minimal, staff levels were reduced, and the hospital's ability to respond to threats was most limited. His weapon selection and tactical gear indicated planning and preparation that went far beyond spontaneous violence. Frank was conducting his routine patrol of the main floor when the attack began. His position near the information desk gave him immediate visual contact with the threat, and his tactical training allowed him to assess the situation with professional clarity that would have been impossible for civilian security personnel. The attacker's movements, weapon handling, and target selection told Frank everything he needed to know about the threat level and the appropriate response. This was not a disturbed individual acting impulsively. This was a planned assault by someone with training and preparation who intended to kill as many people as possible before law enforcement could respond. Frank's SWAT training kicked in with automatic precision. Instead of following standard security protocols that would have involved calling for backup and attempting to evacuate civilians, Frank immediately transitioned to tactical mode, treating the situation as an active shooter scenario that required immediate neutralization of the threat. His first priority was protecting the hospital staff and patients who were in immediate danger. The emergency department had 3 nurses, 2 doctors, and approximately 15 patients who were directly exposed to the attacker's line of fire. The main lobby contained several family members who had been waiting for news about their loved ones. Frank's tactical assessment told him that law enforcement response time would be at least 8 to 12 minutes, even with priority dispatch. The attacker could kill dozens of people in that time frame, and conventional security protocols would be completely inadequate to prevent a massacre. For the first time in 15 years, Frank Williams stopped pretending to be a hospital security guard and became what he had always been, a SWAT team member with 23 years of experience in neutralizing exactly this kind of threat. Frank's response was swift, professional, and devastatingly effective. His tactical training took over with automatic precision, and he began implementing neutralization procedures that he had used hundreds of times during his SWAT career. The hospital's layout, which he had studied for 15 years, became a tactical advantage that allowed him to position himself for optimal response to the threat. His first action was to activate the hospital's emergency communication system, but instead of following standard protocols, he provided tactical intelligence that reflected his professional assessment of the situation. His radio communications were precise, professional, and contained information that civilian security personnel would never have been able to provide. Frank used the hospital's architecture to his advantage, moving through corridors and service areas that he had mapped during 15 years of security work. His knowledge of the building's layout allowed him to position himself for tactical advantage while remaining undetected by the attacker, who was following the reconnaissance plan that Frank had been monitoring. The confrontation, when it came, was brief and decisive. Frank's tactical training, combined with his intimate knowledge of the hospital's layout, allowed him to neutralize the threat before the attacker could harm any patients or staff members. His response was textbook SWAT procedure, executed with the precision and professionalism that had made him one of Chicago's most effective tactical officers. The attacker, who had expected to encounter minimal resistance from hospital security, found himself facing someone with 23 years of experience in exactly this type of situation. Frank's tactical response was so professional and effective that the threat was neutralized before most people in the hospital even realized what was happening. Frank's tactical intervention prevented what could have been one of the most devastating attacks on a medical facility in Chicago's history. His professional response, combined with his detailed knowledge of the hospital's operations, saved countless lives and prevented injuries that would have overwhelmed the city's emergency response capabilities. But Frank's cover as a simple security guard was completely blown. His tactical response, professional communication, and obvious expertise in neutralizing armed threats made it impossible to maintain the fiction that he was just another hospital employee with basic security training. Within minutes of the incident, Chicago General was swarming with law enforcement personnel, emergency responders, and federal agents who recognized the professional quality of Frank's tactical response. The Chicago Police Department SWAT team, FBI tactical specialists, and hospital security supervisors all wanted to understand how a hospital security guard had demonstrated such advanced tactical capabilities. Frank's former colleagues from the Chicago Police Department arrived as part of the emergency response and immediately recognized both his tactical methods and his professional competence. Word spread quickly through the law enforcement community that the hospital security guard who had neutralized the threat was actually Frank Williams, a retired SWAT team member with over 2 decades of tactical experience. The revelation transformed the entire narrative of the incident. Instead of a lucky intervention by an alert security guard, the story became a professional tactical response by one of Chicago's most experienced SWAT operators who had continued protecting the community even after his official retirement from law enforcement. Hospital Administrator Dr. Sarah Chen was among the first to learn about Frank's true background. Her conversation with the responding SWAT team commander revealed that her quiet, reliable night security guard was actually a decorated police veteran with tactical experience that exceeded that of most active duty officers. The media response was immediate and intense. The story of the hospital security guard who turned out to be a retired SWAT team member became national news within hours, inspiring admiration and curiosity about the man who had spent 15 years protecting Chicago General while concealing his extraordinary background. Frank struggled with the sudden exposure after 15 years of carefully maintained anonymity. He had chosen hospital security specifically to avoid the high-profile, high-stress situations that had defined his police career, and the media attention made him uncomfortable in ways that tactical operations never had. But the response from the hospital community was overwhelmingly positive. Instead of feeling deceived by his hidden background, patients, staff members, and visitors expressed gratitude for the protection he had unknowingly provided for 15 years. Many realized that his professional approach to security work had been keeping them safer than they had ever known. The investigation into the planned attack revealed that Frank's observations and tactical intervention had prevented a catastrophic assault that could have resulted in dozens of casualties. The attacker had planned a coordinated assault on multiple areas of the hospital with the intent of causing maximum harm to patients, staff, and visitors. Frank's detailed surveillance reports, which he had compiled during his investigation of the suspicious reconnaissance activities, provided law enforcement with comprehensive intelligence about the planned attack and potential accomplices. His professional documentation exceeded the quality of reports produced by many active-duty officers. The Chicago Police Department offered Frank consulting positions that would have provided significant financial compensation for his tactical expertise. Federal agencies reached out with opportunities to train security personnel at critical infrastructure facilities throughout the region. But Frank realized that his most important contribution hadn't been the dramatic neutralization of a single threat, but the 15 years of professional vigilance that had preceded it. His daily attention to security protocols, his systematic approach to threat assessment, and his comprehensive knowledge of the hospital's vulnerabilities had created a foundation of protection that most people never knew existed. Chicago General implemented enhanced security protocols based on Frank's recommendations, combining his tactical expertise with standard hospital security procedures. His approach to threat assessment and emergency response became a model for medical facilities throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. The hospital established a security consulting program that utilized Frank's expertise to train other security personnel and improve emergency response capabilities. His unique combination of tactical experience and intimate knowledge of hospital operations made him an invaluable resource for protecting medical facilities throughout the region. Frank's story spread throughout the law enforcement community and inspired other retired tactical officers to consider security positions at critical civilian facilities. His demonstration that SWAT training could be effectively adapted to civilian protection work encouraged other veterans to seek opportunities where their specialized skills could continue to serve the public. Years later, Frank would reflect on the unexpected turn his retirement had taken. He had expected to spend his post-police career in quiet anonymity, providing basic security services while avoiding the life-and-death situations that had defined his law enforcement career. Instead, he had found himself at the center of one of the most significant security incidents in Chicago General's history. The skills he had developed during 23 years of police work, tactical thinking, threat assessment, systematic planning, and crisis response proved to be perfectly suited to hospital security work. The same abilities that had made him an effective SWAT team member made him an exceptional protector of vulnerable patients and dedicated medical staff. Frank's approach to security work emphasized the importance of understanding the environment, building relationships with the people being protected, and maintaining constant vigilance even during routine periods. His police experience had taught him that effective protection requires patience, professionalism, and the ability to recognize threats before they fully develop. The hospital's safety record continued to improve as Frank's techniques were adopted by other security personnel and staff members. His training programs helped create a culture of security awareness that extended beyond the security department to include nurses, doctors, and administrative staff who learned to recognize and report potential threats. Frank's house became a gathering place for other retired law enforcement officers who had found ways to continue serving their communities in civilian careers. They formed an informal network of experienced professionals who provided security consulting, training services, and emergency response planning throughout the Chicago area. The transformation of Frank's post-retirement life from quiet security guard to recognized expert demonstrated that specialized skills developed in law enforcement could have applications far beyond police work. His success inspired other retired officers to consider how their tactical expertise might be adapted to serve community needs in civilian contexts. Frank's partnership with Chicago General became a permanent arrangement that benefited both the hospital and the broader community. His expertise helped protect patients and staff, educated security professionals, and created a model for law enforcement civilian cooperation that transcended traditional boundaries. The retired SWAT team member who had become a hospital security guard proved that service doesn't end with law enforcement retirement, that tactical skills can find new applications in unexpected contexts, and that the desire to protect others can be fulfilled in many different ways. Frank Williams had spent 23 years protecting Chicago's citizens as a police officer and SWAT team member. In retirement, he found a way to continue that mission by protecting the city's most vulnerable residents, patients and families who came to Chicago General seeking healing and hope. His story reminds us that expertise takes many forms, that dedication can be expressed through quiet service, and that the most important protection often comes from those who use their professional skills to serve others without seeking recognition or reward. The security guard who stopped a hospital attack had spent decades learning to neutralize threats and protect innocent people. His transition from tactical law enforcement to medical facility security proved that the fundamental mission of protecting others could continue long after the uniform came off and the badge was retired.